Hi everyone, it's Jessica, and it is April 3rd, 2015. This is VEDA number 3, and it is also another edition of Raleigh Rambles, where I process something that I'm thinking about out loud and share it with all of you. Today I am thinking about the identities that we create for ourselves and aspects of others that we take on for ourselves and that sort of become part of our identities. And I'm tracing this back to a situation that happened when I was in first and second grade. I had a really wonderful teacher, Janie Cummings, who I still get to stay in touch with to this day. And she was very formative part of my life, and the first in a series of amazing elementary teachers who I was fortunate enough to learn with. But she said a lot of things to my parents about how I was, things like, she's the only student who laughs at my jokes. It's so wonderful, because I was the only student who understood her jokes. But she also said something to my parents once, which was, Jessica is a sponge. She absorbs everything. She's always watching and listening and taking on all of those things and processing all of the things that are going on around her. And she's taking these things on very quickly and processing them. And I suppose a lot of children are this way, but I've sort of come to realize that as I was growing up, perhaps I was cataloging all of my experiences and the feedback that I was receiving from the outside world, or at least how I perceived that it was. And I was cataloging that into two buckets. One being the things that received a positive kind of feedback, like the Jessica is a sponge comment, I put into the this is a good thing. This is a positive quality about myself. I should keep this quality. I should in many ways do more of this. And then also I think there were things that I maybe didn't have as many things in this category, but things that were not perceived as well, or things that didn't serve me as well, or things that just maybe went unnoticed. Perhaps there are things in that category that just sort of fell by the wayside because I didn't receive positive feedback about it. It might have been a really positive quality about myself, but if no one ever gave me that feedback that it was a positive aspect of my personality, then maybe it never made its way to the this is a good thing, keep doing it kind of bucket. So I'm thinking a lot about that in terms of how that influences the people we are as adults, and how that sort of crafts our identity and how we create this persona of ourselves. And that I think by adulthood we start to maybe even check certain things off or shelve certain things about ourselves that we just take as we accept them, and we take them as, yes, these are the things that are great about me, and we don't necessarily look at them. And so I've been taking a lot of these things off the shelf lately and thinking about them, and this is one of those aspects of my persona, is that I am a sponge and I do watch and observe and listen, and I think that serves me really well and has served me really well over the years in a lot of different situations. But I think, like all things in our toolbox that we sort of start to catalog and that become part of our personalities, I think there are things that we need to be a little more cognizant about when we are using them and when they serve us well and when maybe we don't use them. And so I think that I've just sort of taken a lot of these things for granted, that they are aspects of myself that are good and that I should keep doing, and that it's important to just sort of always pull those out. And I don't know that I've been as intentional with that sponge-like quality that I have as maybe I could be. So I've been thinking about that a lot, and how, there are a lot of situations where I, even take on the emotions of the person around me. And I think in some situations that can be great. If someone else is sad, I feel sad. If someone else is excited, I get really excited. It doesn't take much for me to soak in the emotions that they are having, or if what they're putting out there isn't as obvious, I can even sort of absorb what I perceive to be those emotions, and sometimes those aren't even accurate. So I think that I'm constantly thinking about, how does someone else see the situation, or what is someone else thinking or feeling? And that can be really great, but sometimes that can be not so great. It can be overwhelming to carry all of that around all the time, and to not be able to put it on a back burner, or to sort of segment how I'm feeling from how someone else might be feeling, or how I perceive them to be feeling. But I think it also can be detrimental, because there might be situations where, instead of staying really true to my voice and knowing what that voice is, I might be sort of taking on this chameleon aspect of my personality, whereby I kind of observe and see where everyone's at, and then almost take myself to that level, wherever that may be, and try to sort of match or meet them. And I think that, again, there's actually a lot of research around this, and the psychology and and effects that it has on relationships and on the way that people interact with each other. There's some really fascinating things about that. And I think even in its simplest form, in cognitive coaching work, you talk about building rapport with the person who you're working with, and making sure that you face them. And these are even skills that I taught my students. I always made sure that my kids knew that a non-negotiable in our classroom was that you always are sitting eye level with the people in your group. So, if 3 people are sitting in a chair, you don't sit on the floor and stare up at them. The dynamic that creates is different. And so I always made sure my kids were aware of those things. But I think that it's important to also recognize when I am doing that. And I'm not sure I've been as intentional with that. So I am sort of setting a goal for myself to check myself a little bit when I'm in a meeting or a conversation, or even if it's a virtual communication. I think that sometimes I take on the voice of others instead of really staying true to my own voice. And in some ways, I'm trying to think about, how is my voice different than those around me? I very intentionally take great care to fill my life as much as possible with really intelligent, awesome, passionate people. And I think that is important, and that's something that is important to me. But I also think that means that there are a lot of people with a lot of strong voices, and maybe it makes it a little harder for me to know what is my voice, and to not just sort of go along with being that chameleon in that situation, but really staying true to my voice and my personality, and knowing what that is, and knowing I think it's okay to play the chameleon if you are aware that you're doing it. I'm not sure I'm always aware of it. So I'm going to take more note of those things, and try to be a little more cautious as to when I'm using that and when it's serving me well and when maybe it isn't. And I'm also kind of flipping that in reverse and thinking about, when is my voice too strong or too loud, or maybe not allowing space for someone else's voice to come through. I think that when someone is a little quieter, I tend to very quickly think about that and think about how I can make space for someone who might not be as vocal, or when I know that someone needs a little more processing time in situations, I often try to be really careful about giving them that time to do that. But I think with people who I perceive that they have a bit of a stronger voice, I don't always make sure that I'm opening that time and space for them to reflect, to think, or to process more, or to have their voice to stay true to their voice. So I'm thinking about all of that right now. And as always, if you have thoughts or questions, or if this makes you think about other things, please share them in the comments, or you can find me on Twitter or Google+. But that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I hope that you enjoyed this ramble. It was very helpful for me. So if you've made it this far, thank you. And I will chat with all of you tomorrow.